In fact, I would recommend to you going back onto Chabad.org, daily study, Rambam, and then you go back like 19 days to the beginning when they started Hilchos Kiddush HaChedesh. You'll love it. It's all about, Rambam tells a person how to calculate, how the sages used to calculate exactly when and where the moon would first be sighted. Because they had to know when the witnesses would come to give testimony that they saw the new moon. They had to know if they were telling the truth or lying. Or they were making a mistake. Maybe they saw an optical illusion.
Daily study.
Yeah.
Rambam, you said?
Yeah, Rambam, right. One a day. And you listen to the shiurim there. For go back a couple of weeks, 2 weeks.
Okay.
And till you get to Hilchos Kiddush HaChedesh.
Oh, yep.
There you go. And you'll do one chapter a day. It'll take you about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour a day to listen to the chapter.
Chapter 12 of Kiddush.
Let's go back 12 more days.
Okay.
Go back 12 more days. And the first 6, 7 days are just interesting, very interesting. After 7 days, it starts to get complicated. All the arithmetic, the geometry. I don't know, how do they figure out all these angles of the movements of heavenly bodies? It's amazing to me. The Greeks did it and the sages did it. Which came first? We don't know. We don't know which came first. But they had different ways of doing it. The Jews had different ways of doing it from the Greeks. And he maintains that the Jewish way is much simpler, cuts through a lot of very, very complicated calculations. Because there's calculations, is because all the different factors, the sun, the moon, the earth, the planets, they move in different spheres, in different directions, and it's all coordinated. It's amazing. It's a mind-boggling how Hashem created this. So you had to know and compare all these different orbits and their angular interactions.
I just found chapter 1 and I copied the link.
Huh?
I found chapter 1, so
Good.
I copied the link.
Good. When you have a chance, you'll sit down. I don't know, today is busy, short day, getting ready for Shabbos. When you have a chance, you'll start to listen to it. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I can get up to about chapter 8. Then Rabbi Gordon, who was a wonderful teacher, he checks out right away, almost right away. He gives it over to Rabbi Lipster, who understands these things.
By the way, Rabbi, Esther Bayless not feeling well, but she's on the Zoom, so.
She's what?
On the Zoom.
Oh, really? Not yet. Oh, Leora's on the phone. Yes, she is. Good morning, Leora, and good morning, Esther Bela. I'm so glad you're here.
Good morning, Rabbi Pape. It's a joy to be in your class as always.
Oh, well, it's a joy to have you. Believe me. So there you are. That's why it's starting late, because I couldn't get my key out of the door and it's still stuck in the door. I'm gonna have to call a locksmith to get it out.
Oh no.
They specialize in
like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, people need them for emergencies.
This is an emergency.
No, it's not an emergency.
It is.
Emergencies are when, you know what's an emergency? When we had little children, we used to go to the country for Shabbos. So my wife stayed up there all the time, and I would spend the week in the city. I'd go up for Shabbos. Friday afternoon, I come to my house, I pack up my stuff. I have everything ready to go into the car, and my keys, I made the fatal mistake of taking my keys out of my pocket. I try never, ever, ever to take keys out of my pocket. You know, you have your keys, you come in, I'm not going to put them down on the desk. I try never to take my keys out of my pocket. Anyway, here it's Friday afternoon, like 3 o'clock. So I've got at least a 3 hour, maybe 4 hour drive to get to the country in time for Shabbos. Shabbos comes in around 7:30, 8 o'clock. Fine. I go out. I put things in the car, I go back in the house, I go out to get something from the car. I'm sure I have my keys in my pocket. I close the door, it locks, and it turns out I don't have my keys in my pocket. And my Shabbos clothes are in the house, and my keys to the car are in the house. Then that's an emergency. What I do is spend the whole day with no place to go, no place to eat. All my friends that I would go to in such a situation are already in the country. So I know that my daughter and her husband, newly married, are going to the country with their infant, two young children. I run over to her house because I know they're leaving for the country. Will I catch them or not? Baruch Hashem, they were just leaving and they had a key to the house. But that's an emergency. That kind of emergency. In those days, we didn't have Chaverim in those days. Michal Eliyahu. Okay, you have to finish up. So that's one example of, now also you should know, the Rebbe's brother, Rabbi Yisrael Aryeh Leib, was an unbelievable genius and expressed his genius. He was deep in Hasidus, he was learned, but he expressed his genius especially in the philosophy of mathematics. And he became a professor of mathematics. The Rebbe found, he passed away young, and the Rebbe found a manuscript that he had written. He didn't want to learn from anybody. He worked everything out from basic principles that he established himself. Very independent-minded. Very big Yiddish Shemayim, but it was like if he was the first man, he had to work all this out by himself. So the Rebbe found this manuscript, and he contacted a professor of mathematics at the University of Columbia, named I think it was Rosenberg or Rosenblum. And he asked him, he said he had come in, he had this manuscript, would he please edit it? Or have one of his students edit it? He wanted to produce an edited edition under his supervision. So he examined it, and the Rebbe said, what do you think about it? He says, whoever did it is a very, very deep thinker, a great genius. Why do you want to bring it out? He says, that's a personal thing. I think it shouldn't just remain obscure, it should be published. And he worked on it. So there you are. It's another example of a great chassid who was also a great scholar in mathematics. Only after he had done it did the Rebbe reveal to him that it was actually written by his own brother. It was like a posthumous gift to his younger brother. And the Torah, the Talmud, is full of very complicated calculations. Mathematics they say it's the Jewish science, there's so many levels, and I'm not good at numbers at all, never was. When I was in high school, our science teacher used to say, yeah, you people, you study in languages, you can't think for yourselves. All you can do is memorize. He was right. There was a guy in my class, he was such a genius, he could, any mathematical problem in any of the mathematical sciences, geometry, chemistry, physics, he could work them all out. He just always understood exactly how to work out the step by step, how to come to this, how to solve this problem. I could never do it. Now he's like in charge of like the port of Boston. He went, big genius. I was never good at it. And when we come to these sections in the Talmud, I bomb out. I can't handle them. But you could. And there's no reason that you shouldn't use your skills in a very holy way, Kiddush Shem Shemayim.
Rabbi Pape, did you know that I'm a math tutor?
Tutor? Well, you should
Mhm.
get together with Hannah Bina here because she wants to be an actuary.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Well, why not? If this is your talent, you should pursue it, develop it. This is also mathematics is a godly science.
All this time, Rabbi Pape, and I didn't realize that there was math in the Talmud.
What do you mean all this time? Until this moment?
Yeah, like I never realized it.
You think
I never learned about it.
You know, there's an old expression, you know, you really know that? Do you know this person who said, did Einstein know mathematics? Where do you think that came from? Einstein I don't know this for sure. I've only heard of this, but there are two different contradictory theories about what's happening in the universe. One is that it's exploding. Things are constantly becoming further disconnected. And the other theory that Einstein embraced was that the universe is a unified whole that turns back upon itself. And they said, why did you develop this theory? After all, theory is based on an assumption. He says, because he was not religious, but as a Jew, I could not conceive of the whole of creation being based on anything other than a principle of unity. There you are, it's in the psyche of the being, of the Jewish creature. Let's finish up. We're at the question, how, if a person learns science and the wisdom of the nations, and he just loves it. I used to love geometry, you know. I wasn't as good as my friend Teddy, who was the genius. He was also a good swimmer, a very strong swimmer. He was on the swimming team. But he could solve problems I could never figure out how to work them out. You know how I got through? I used to memorize all the examples. I couldn't figure them out by myself. I could memorize all the examples and I could recognize how to apply an example to a problem. So I got through, but I knew it wasn't going to be my future. Okay, so in the page 114, so we learned that a person learning science just for its own sake, just because he likes it, and just to serve his own personal ends, to be successful, to get a good job, to earn a good living, and so on, to be a NASA scientist. Here, Velvel Green was a NASA scientist in the early days of rocket ship travel. And his field was studying the effect of rocket ship travel on germs in rocket ships. And the Rebbe developed a very close relationship with him. He was not religious at all. It's very interesting. You can get he wrote a book of his correspondences with the Rebbe. The first time he met a Lubavitcher, this Rabbi Feller from Minnesota had been trying to get to see him for months. He finally got an appointment at around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And he finally comes in and he looks out the window. He sees the sun is almost setting. He says, "Excuse me, Professor." And he takes out his prayer belt, his gartel, straps himself up, turns to the wall and starts davening. And Dr. Green didn't know what he was supposed to. He says he didn't know if he's allowed to smoke. He was supposed to, he had to put out his cigarette, or if he was supposed to stand up, or he didn't know what to do. So the guy finally gets to see me after all this, and he starts davening into the wall. And he put on tefillin with him for the very first time. And then he brought him to the Rebbe. He came to the Rebbe for Yechidus and he saw everybody's wearing a hat. He didn't have a hat. So he had enough intelligence to realize that the protocol was you had to wear a hat. But it was evening. Where could he get a hat? So they said, well, there's a lady, she has an old, a secondhand store on Kingston Avenue, where I think everything but the baby is there now. And it was big, it was like 2 stores. And she had all kinds of old junk people threw out, and she would sell it, and all the money went to the yeshiva. And she would be in 770 standing with a pushka collecting money for the yeshiva. It's a very interesting story. I'll tell you her story another time. But her husband was taken away and shot, leaving her with 6 kids, 6 little kids in Russia. He was secretly circumcising Jewish children, which was, against the law. So they shot him, killed him. And she had to fend for him. And they threw her out of her apartment because she was obviously an enemy of the state. So she didn't deserve to get housing from the state. Anyway, she had this store. It's called the Baba Mariasha. A little lady with a squeaky voice. And he comes in and he says, they told me that you have hats for sale. Can you sell me a hat? She says, oh yeah, of course, I have very good hats. She said, where's your hat? He said, over there, you can find a nice hat. He found the hat, it was all crumpled up. It was kind of off-colored. And he said, can I buy this hat? She said, oh yeah, it's not, you can buy it $10. Hat, it cost $200, right? She sold it for 10. And he said, you sure this is okay to wear? He said, oh yeah, it's very nice, very nice. So he took the hat and he went to 770 to have Yechidus with the Rebbe, and he goes in wearing this hat. The Rebbe takes a look at him and welcomes him. He looks down, and the Rebbe looks up and he says, where did you get that hat? He says, from a lady. She had a store up on Kingston Avenue. So Rebbe says to him, Dr. Green, if you don't take off the hat, I won't be able to speak to you with a straight face. But, so anyway, there's a lot of room in Judaism for science and for mathematics. But, if we don't apply it to our lives as Jews in the service of Hashem, however, then it's klippa. All the sciences get the source of their life from klippas noiga, the neutral klippa. A klippa is a level that hides godliness. So there's a neutral klippa that hides godliness, not evil. It's not evil, but if it's only used for selfish purposes are evil, okay?
Can you give an example of selfish purposes that is klippa? Because if it's to get a job that, so you can support your family, then that's fine. That's not klippa, but I just can't think of an example that's klippa.
You can't think of an example?
Can you give me one?
Like if somebody has the love for, he has the.
I know somebody has 26 pairs of shoes. Why does he have 26 pairs of shoes? Teenager. He has a taiva. Every time he sees another pair of shoes that thinks it's cool, he buys it. So he works to earn money to buy another pair of shoes. It's just klippa. There's no holiness in it whatsoever. There you go. How about if I have a taiva to do it to go to gamble? Okay, gambling is forbidden. A person who gambles cannot give testimony in court. I earn money. I'm a lawyer. I earn money. I earn a lot of money. I'm a good lawyer, but I have an addiction. I'm addicted to gambling. I happen to know somebody. We say, how do you know so many people? I know somebody. This is a tragic case. To the tragic person from a very, very fine family. He once gambled, and when I was in college, I had a very good friend who was not religious. I wasn't religious either. And he got involved in gambling and he won money, and that was the hook. So he gambled more and he won more money, and he gambled more and then he lost. So then he wanted to gamble again to make up his loss. And he succeeded. So then he gambled more and he failed. And then he gambled more to make up his loss, and he failed. And he gambled more to make up his loss, and he failed. And that he was gambling on anything, and he would call up what's called the bookie, the bookmaker, and he said, "Who's playing today? This college team and that college team." He didn't know where the colleges were. What are the odds? Okay, I'll place a bet on this odd. And he ended up owing the mafia, the Italian mafia, right? They kill you if you don't pay your debts. You end up in the Hudson River. He owed them hundreds of thousands of dollars. Oh, he was so nervous. And finally, he made one bet that paid off all his debts. And then that was it. He never gambled again. But he became a lawyer. He always wanted to be a lawyer. When he was young, his father was very wealthy, and he was in the scrap metal business in Niagara Falls. And then he had a sudden heart attack and died, leaving him and his brother and his mother without any means of support. They suddenly became very, very poor. So he was determined to be a lawyer. He always wanted to be a lawyer, and he was determined to be the best lawyer, and he succeeded. He became the best lawyer in Canada. He was the top criminal lawyer in the whole of Canada. Eddie Greenspan, you can look him up. He's on the internet. He passed away 2 years ago. He was my very dear friend. We were the only 2 Jews in the whole dorm. I used to help him. I got him through a lot of his exams in those days. So, but he used all his money for what? So let's say a person makes a lot of money, tons of money, defending criminals, mamish getting them off on technicalities the whole time, and then uses his money to go to Florida to have a nice apartment, and maybe he gives charity 5% of what he earns. It's pure klippa. Sholosh klippas atameis. There's no holiness. Or even worse, let's say a person has a taiva, not for, so that was the example. A person makes a lot of money and he uses the money to gamble. That's a pure sholish klippas tameus. Impure, because it's just self-centered. It's like gambling is like alcohol and heroin and addicting drug, any addicting kind of drug. Gambling is an addiction. Just like a person who's addicted to a drug, the whole time he's thinking, how am I going to get my next fix? Right? A gambler is the same. You can read about it. A person is sitting in his job thinking, when can he finish up his work so he can run down to the bookie and make another bet. He'll bet on the horses, he'll bet on the sports, he'll bet on who's going to win the election and by how much. Bet on anything, because maybe he's going to win. Anyway, that happened to a guy, and he started losing, and then he was financing his losses by creating what they call a Ponzi scheme, that he was encouraging people to invest their money with him, and he would pay back the interest that he promised to his investors with the money that other investors were giving him, so that he was circulating the money, but he really wasn't using it for business like he said he was. And then they arrested this Jewish guy in Florida who was doing a very elaborate job, and he created a huge, complex, very professional kind of business. And then all of a sudden the stock market crashed, and he couldn't get the cash to pay off the people, and he couldn't keep it going. And they arrested him, they put him in jail. So these are examples of people who become addicted to a taiva. So the Tanya talks a lot about different kinds of taivas. And a person does a thing for his taiva, that is, we're learning now in the regular day-by-day shir Tanya, that is like idol worship. When you become dedicated to your desires, to your lusts, to your passions, to your I must have it, the feelings I must have this, that's idol worship. That's worshiping your taiva instead of worshiping Hashem.
What's taiva in English?
Taiva is lust. Lust. Strong, passionate desire for, fill in the blanks. Some people have a taiva to build fires. They're called pyromaniacs. Some people have a taiva to steal money, to steal things. I know a person, here you go again, Chanabina. I know a person whose wife is a kleptomaniac.
Oh, I've heard of that.
She's addicted to stealing, and he's constantly going to stores and paying for the things that she steals. Shall I tell you a story?
Is there anything you can do about
There was a, what can you do about it?
Like, is there anything like you can do about kleptomania?
What do you do for a person who's addicted?
No, but is there actually a cure for
I'm
that?
sure there are methods of treatment. You have to go into rehab. You have to have a mental readjustment. There are people who are addicted to playing with little children, having sex with little children. There are people addicted to it. People with families, with wives and children. And they get caught, and they have to be put in a position where they're not even allowed to be with their own family. They're not allowed to be in any position with children. All kinds of sick things that people get addicted to, and they have to go through rehab. If they don't go to rehab, they go to jail because they're dangerous. Okay. So what are we learning here? That the science of the nations, the inner light from the science of the nations is klippus noiga, but it's much more dangerous to a person who uses it in a totally selfish way than idle talk, because idle talk, we learned, only contaminates the midas, that's to say your 7 emotional drives in your heart, like love and fear and harmony and the desire to win and the desire to be a perfectionist. These 7 emotions, like the parallel the 7 days of the week, those 7 aspects in the element of air, because air is used for speaking. So if a person says lashon hara or idle talk, that contaminates one of these midas or combinations of these midas with the element of air in the animal soul. But whereas if a person learns Torah, then that elevates and purifies the element of air in the godly soul, in the midas of the element of air in the godly soul. But in the sciences are not relevant to a simple working person who just sort of jokes around and enjoys a couple beer or more than a couple beer with his friends in the bar or in the pub. He can't begin to think about abstract mathematics. I had a chavrusa once. When I started learning in yeshiva, I didn't have a chavrusa. And a new boy came in and he knew nothing. And I was already on a higher level in terms of my learning, but I didn't have anybody to learn with. And learning with someone is very important. I went over to this new guy. I said, would you like to learn with me? He says, but I'm way behind. I said, I'll catch you up. We caught up. We became great friends. And he was brilliant. And he was a PhD in abstract mathematics. There you are. And he far surpassed me, and we learned together for a couple of years. Tzvi the sax. Very sweet person. Moved to Pittsburgh, then he suddenly at an early age, he got a case of that terrible disease that killed him. Before Corona was the big threat. Okay, so the science contaminates not just the feelings in your heart, the 7 feelings in your heart. Science, if it's done for selfish reasons or history, any of the wisdom, philosophy, languages, social theory, if it's just for selfish reasons, so it contaminates the intellect, the Chabad of your animal soul, because your animal soul also has Chabad seichel and midas. Just like your godly soul has seichel, 3 mothers and 7 days of creation, your animal soul also has 3 mothers and 7 days of creation, so to speak. Same seichel and midas. But ordinary people who are simple folk, they're not educated. This is out of their realm altogether. Okay, so in the case of science and the nations, a person defiles, he contaminates the Chabad of his godly soul with the impurity of Klippus Noiga. Got it? Does that make sense? You understand, everybody?
Yes, but then I get confused with the feeling.
What?
I get confused when you say about the feelings, like you said.
Okay, well, this goes back to chapter 3, that you have brains in your head and you have feelings in your heart.
Right.
Now, get this rule into your head. You don't do anything in this world except from your feelings. Whatever you do because you feel like doing it. You have an emotion that drives you to do it. You don't do anything from your head.
Right.
Your head is just a guide. Okay?
So when the feeling is affected,
When feelings are affected when you're doing things just because of your emotions.
so once you
Like when you're thinking from your heart down, not from your head.
So what's the difference between getting infected intellectual and feeling?
Because when a person gives the example here of idle talk contaminates the feelings that you have that motivate and drive what you do with the element of air in your animal soul. If you're learning Torah, then the Torah you learn elevates and purifies the element of air in your godly soul. If you learn science for selfish reasons, it contaminates not the element of air, it contaminates the element of air in the midas and the feelings of your heart. It contaminates your intellect.
Yes. Okay.
Because the sciences get their energy from Chabad. But where does it come from? He's going to tell you now. From Chabad, but from where? Chabad, okay, I thought I would be able to finish the class, I can't. I'm gonna have to finish this tomorrow, Monday. Okay, I have to explain a whole new concept here. The concept of chaos and stability. Before the world existed in a stable state, it was in a chaotic state. We have to go back and explain this. Okay, so have a great Shabbos, girls. Yesterday was Rosh Hashanah Ilones, the new year for trees. And we learned from this that a man is compared to a tree. So we should all be like trees. Our roots should be good roots. Our roots are our ancestors, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. These are our roots. They are the emunah, the belief that we have in our Creator. The roots of a tree enable it to stand strong against the winds. And the mitzvahs are the trunk of the tree that grows bigger and bigger and bigger from a little slim sapling to a big thick tree. One ring at a time, one mitzvah at a time, the tree grows. But the main thing of the tree is that it should bear fruit. And when Moshiach comes, even trees that are not fruit bearing will bear fruit. All the trees will bear fruit. And the fruit is sweet because it has sweetness in it from chesed of Hashem. And so the fruit that we should be able to bear is the acts of kindness that we do in love for other people. Okay, you'll come and we'll see each other next week. Who is this? This is Hannah Dietzel. Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the shir. Camila, thank you for joining us. Leora, Esther Bailoff.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi Pape. Good Shabbos.
Remember, we want Mashiach now.
Amen.
Man.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos, b'Shabbos, when we read about the splitting